Do I really need to do an intro for this? Dark Souls, one of the greatest game trilogies of all time. If you don't know it, how did you honestly manage to find this video, let alone even click on it? Whatever, besides the point. Dark Souls 1 and 3 are revered as amazing games, but for some reason, the response on Dark Souls 2 has always been, more so mixed than anything else. Some people are diehard fans and enjoy the game for what it is, but some people simply don't end up enjoying the game as much, to say the least. Look at the Steam comment, for example. The worst game aside from Ninja Blade that From Software has ever created. First of all, what the actual is Ninja Blade? And second of all, yeah, there's no second of all. Okay, that's enough. You get the gist of things, I assume, and hope so. I played Dark Souls 2 for the first time, and I'm here to nitpick what I think makes the game less desirable than the other two games in the trilogy. And no, I won't be saying game sucks because it wasn't directed by Miyazaki. I'm gonna try to be as fair as possible, probably for once in my life. Also, one last disclaimer, I haven't played through the full game yet. That's for another video, and for that matter, I don't think I've even made it that far, but I think I can see where the game gets its mixed reviews, and I need to milk 2 video ideas at the very least out of this game, so cut me some slack. Without further ado, this is what I think makes Dark Souls 2 worse than the other two. Okay, so let's make this easy on everyone here and break this down into 3 core ideas that I want to talk about, with the first one being a lot more important than the others in my opinion. First point we need to discuss is these godforsaken, I mean the areas found in this game. I also want to talk about the bosses, of course. You can't look at a Souls game without looking at the bosses. And my final point is the weird little mechanics found in this game, which is pretty broad, but you'll understand what I mean when I get there. Yeah, that should be good enough for my main points, so I'm gonna just start yapping about the main areas in the game. Where to start? Well, how about a major positive? Areas in this game are very visually and atmospherically appealing. Wow. Felt super smart saying that. Now, as I have said before, I haven't played through this entire game, but I got like 10 hours in so far, and here is the areas I explored so far. We got some major ones like Majula, of course, and we got some big castle areas like the Lost Bastille, which I might have a few choice words about, and some absolutely terrible areas like No Man's Wharf and, Oh, you weren't supposed to see that. Please forget about that. Anyways, here's the full list of the areas I managed to get to, or more so, the bonfires, but you get the gist, hopefully. Now, a lot of these areas, in a vacuum, are very good. I really enjoyed looking around and finding doors that are either locked or cannot be opened from the side I am currently on. Nothing gets better than the Dark Souls experience. But the main problem is the enemy placement. These games are made to be difficult. I get it. And the areas, in my opinion, are often more challenging than the bosses, which is normally fine. But in this game, oh man, did they just have to place these enemies horribly. The enemies are scattered around in massive bunches with a relatively constant flow of them around every corner. Look at No Man's Wharf, for example. Every 2 seconds of just running through the damn place, you are more than guaranteed to get cornered by some Vikings or undead guys just waiting for you. Or dodge all that and get struck from a random arrow that was shot from 3 miles away 10 minutes ago, and now suddenly you are stuck in the swarm of said enemies that were just chasing you because you just tried to run past on your 5th run through. This can all be chopped up to the Dark Souls experience though, so it's not a big complaint, but I have definitely spilled plenty of choice words just trying to get through these areas, and I found myself saying this quote, "This is Dark Souls," many times. I think the worst part of the areas though is also the best part of these areas. The all-encompassing darkness found in the areas in this game. On one side of the coin, super annoying to deal with because most entrances and lever points are hard to find, and getting swarmed with enemies becomes relatively easy when you can't see fuck all. And just trying to walk around an area and getting shot with poison statues or finding an exploding undead can become a very tedious experience. But like I said, this is also a great thing. The darkness in these areas leads to a more immersive experience, making you feel truly lost at times, wondering where you can go, living in fear of what's to come around the next corner. You ask things like, where do I go next? Actually, where can I even go next? Which I think truly embodies the Souls-like experience. This game isn't supposed to be happy and bright. It's dark, cold, and torturous, where all you can do is just muddle through and try to survive. Okay, that got too serious for a moment. Time to go into a bit more detail on specific areas. Now, I haven't gone through too much, but there was a few big areas that stood out to me, like, of course, No Man's Wharf, but also the Lost Bastille, Hyde's Tower, the forest area, and this godforsaken ladder section near the Black Gulch. I'll try to be brief. No Man's Wharf is an undead pirate port, which on paper is super cool. I love dead pirates just as much as the other guy. But why is there so many goddamn enemies? This area is absolutely swarming with these goobers. It's so tedious to progress through, and I ran around like a headless chicken forever because you need to find this random lever and call a boat in the port. Area looks super cool, plays like dog shit. Lost Bastille is, what can I say, a typical castle tower thing. I like the neat little secrets of this area, like Macduff's bonfire through a random broken wall, or whatever this little secret thing I got from using using a keystone is. This area's downfall, though, is yet again an absurd amount of enemies. But the problem this time is the enemies are paired with tediously placed powder kegs, so you dodge the enemies, and you still blow up. This is Dark Souls. But the mass amounts of enemies in this area is also pretty funny because comedically running away from all of these goobers is very funny to me. Hades Tower and the forest are pretty simplistic areas, and I don't really have much different complaints from these ones. The tower is probably the most straightforward area in the game. Fight an enemy, progress. And the forest is also rather simple if you just spend a little bit of time exploring. Now, in the dark depths nearby the Black Gulch lies a terrible area that is far more tedious than any other. I shall refer to it as ladders. Now, anyone who has played this game or knows this game will probably recognize this ladder maze, and if you don't, you probably just trauma blocked it. And maybe I'm just a big baby, but this was awful. I hated every second of this. I had nowhere to go. There was plenty of fake ladders that just led to my death, self-destructing enemies, and poison-spitting statues. All in all, this area was a miserable experience. If you like this area, good for you. I'm truly happy for you. But I can't find one good thing about this area, and then the short Black Gulch area afterwards is also really annoying, but not as bad since you can find a secret bonfire. Alright, anyways, that's enough complaining about these areas. Time to move on. Time for the exciting part of every Souls game, the bosses. And honestly, the bosses have been pretty underwhelming so far. None of them, except for one, have taken me more than 3 attempts, and all of the movesets, as of right now, are pretty straightforward and to the point. And this game has a pretty bad problem with life gems being brutally overpowered. I didn't go out of my way to upgrade my Estus until after about 8 hours of gameplay, but I'll mention that a bit more in the last section. The difficulty isn't everything in a boss, but there's other things you need to take into account, like the opening, the design, and some other things like music and the arena's atmosphere. Like I did with the areas, here are all the bosses I've fought so far, which isn't really all that much, so I'm really hoping it gets better as the game goes on, which the Souls games usually do. They have a good record for that, so take my judgments with a grain of salt for now. But actually, from what I have fought, there isn't really any that I dislike. Maybe the Flexile Sentry, because he's boring if you just pick which side you like better and fight only that side, but it's not a bad boss. And the Water Rising is a cool idea. I think my favorites so far has been either the Lost Sinner or the Rune Sentinels. The Lost Sinner was a rather easy fight, but the Dark Throne making your lock on range shorter is a cool gimmick, and I like his design in general. Plus, an opening cutscene gives any boss bonus points for me. The run back was pretty dreadful, but it only took me like 3 attempts because at this point I had something stupid like 40 life gems. So healing is rather easy, and with a slow boss, there's a lot of openings for it. Come get me, old man. Loser. But overall, I think that boss was rather solid. The Rune Sentinels didn't have any of the fancy moves, or arena, or gimmick, or even opening cutscene. I like this fight simply because of how brutally unfair it is if you try to approach this fight normally. 3 bosses all at once. You start off by dropping into the arena on a small platform with one of the Sentinels. And without the Silver Cat's Ring, inevitably have to drop into the big part of the arena, you will take fall damage. At least I think it's guaranteed without the ring. But on paper, this is a fight I would absolutely despise. And it was frustrating as hell, especially since I was doing this fight at 4 o'clock in the morning. But that's besides the point. My poor life choices have nothing to do with this. Anyways, I mentioned earlier that this fight is fun because it's unfair. And you may be thinking to yourself some things like, that makes literally no sense. How can a fight being more unfair make it more fun? Or maybe you're already asleep by now, which I'll take that as free watch time hours for me, so thank you. And if you're actually not asleep by now, do me a favor, go ahead and click that little subscribe button down there. It really helps me out. Anyways, back to the real video. But since this fight is unfair, that means I actually had to go out of my way to think of some things to even the playing field, to say the least. How could I approach this differently? Alone, these Sentinels are easy as can be, so if there's a way I can single one out, this fight will be so much better. And turns out, there was a way. The first platform that you were almost encouraged to jump off of is actually a perfect zone to fight the first Sentinel alone, because the others don't jump up until after you beat the first guy. And then after you beat the first Rune Sentinel, if you're still on that platform, of course, you can wait for the next guy and get a bit of time to 1v1 him before the other goober shows up. I think you can get my idea of this fight though. The fun part is making it possible. When you're fighting 2-on-1, it's a pretty typical 2v1, which is always fun, but you can position yourself to bait out some easy attacks. Either way, whether or not you actually agree with me, I found this fun because it was a lot more difficult. There were some other bosses I want to bring up, not because they really left an impression, but more so to acknowledge them for existing. The Rotten had a cool arena, but was ultimately brought down by a simple, monotonous moveset. The only difficulty in this fight was the run back without the shortcut fire. Had a cool opening cutscene though. The Last Giant was a really cool design, but there was literally nothing to this fight, which is quite disappointing for the first boss, but the cutscene was cool, I guess. Oh, and I almost forgot. The most intense battle of all of them. Deep in the dark depths of a cave, the infinite swarm of rats and the Rat Vanguard! I think this fight was comedic because it was less of a fight and more of just rat hunting, but it was a nice change of pace somewhat. Anyways, I think that's enough for my boss section, and this script is already going on longer than expected, so let's roll into section 3. So for this section, it's kind of less of me comparing and contrasting on what's good and bad, and I more so just want to talk about some things in the game that, quite frankly, I think are just weird. Now, they don't all hinder the gameplay, but they are for sure strange, and I can see why some people don't like these mechanics. Now, first of all, something kind of simple, like the life gems in this game. On one hand, having another heal is awesome, because the hitboxes in this game are dog shit. But you can stockpile these motherfuckers so goddamn much. For the Ruined Sentinel fight, I didn't have any left over, so that made the fight way worse than all the other fights. But for something like the Lost Sinner, I had like 40 saved up, and I could just spam these after every single attack, which kinda led to me cheesing the boss, but this was my strategy and this is my video. Another silly little mechanic this game has is the stone statue characters. You need to collect a certain item that I forgot the name of and use it to unpetrify or depetrify, whatever one of those two. Unpetrify these statues and get to secret areas. Seems fine, right? Only issue, some of the main areas are blocked by these statues, and that is very annoying to me. Sometimes in order to progress, you need to go out of your way and search for these stupid branches just because you found a new area and want to see what's there. Not too annoying though, it just kind of limits my exploration potential, and I don't really like that. Another thing that's very annoying is the durability system. Now, all durability resets after resting, but it is so tedious sometimes in this game, especially when you are trying to kill all the enemies you come across. Makes you more so just want to run past everything and skip that area rather than potentially breaking your sword or armor. Also, there's these stupid fucking exploding pots, and they break all your shit, and it's so annoying when you roll through them on accident thinking they're nothing. Why are they here? Anyways, time for the big mechanic I'm pretty sure everyone has been waiting for me to mention. Or maybe no one cares. Either way, the agility stat in this game is so flat out dumb. You can get it by leveling adaptability and attunement, but mostly adaptability because it's a 3-to-1 ratio. Now, why is this stat important? Well, in the other Souls games and Souls-likes, the amount of iframes you get from rolling is determined by your equipment. Heavier usually equals less, and lighter equals more. Makes sense, right? Well, this game is fully dependent off of the level breakpoints on your stupid agility stat, which forces you to level ADP to just have enough iframes to roll like a normal human being, or normal undead, whatever you prefer. This can lead to some cool armor combos, but you can just stack heavy armor and roll like you're wearing nothing. Not much more to say here. The mechanic is super dumb, and if you disagree, reflect. Think about your wrongdoings, and now try again. Anyways, that's about all for this section, so I suppose I'll wrap up this yap sesh. Now, again, take all of what I say in this video with a grain of salt, but not really a grain of salt because I know what I'm talking about, and I'll have another video out soon. Honestly, Dark Souls 2 is very overhated. I may make jokes and complain a lot, but it's still a good game. I think comparatively, it is worse than the other two games, but I'll know that for sure when I play Dark Souls 1, of course. It has many flaws, but it's fine. I'll finish it soon, and in that video, you can hear all my little thoughts about the entire game. I'll be focusing more about the bosses and the gameplay, like my usual. But anyways, I think that's all for Dark Souls 2 today. My last quote, "Fuck you, Dark Souls 2!